As Israel's fight with Hezbollah heats up, thousands of families are fleeing the escalating conflict in Lebanon, pouring into Syria in growing numbers. Israel's top general has said that the country is preparing for a possible ground operation into Lebanon amid growing international pressure for a negotiated ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. But amid the ongoing escalation, diplomatic efforts are gathering pace to de-escalate the hostilities, with France and United States proposing a 21-day ceasefire. Though there is no immediate sign that Israel was poised to enter Lebanon, with the US Pentagon saying that it did not appear quote-unquote imminent, Israel has ramped up its strikes and the Israeli Defense Forces has been hammering Hezbollah since the Lebanese terror group began firing over the border the day after Hamas's October 7th invasion of southern Israel. Meanwhile, Israel's Chief of Staff, Major General Herzi Halevi, has said that these airstrikes had aimed to destroy Hezbollah's infrastructure and prepare for the possibility of Israeli troops crossing the border. Earlier on Wednesday, Hezbollah aimed a long-range missile at Tel Aviv, and Israel targeted the mountains just north of Beirut for the first time in the war, drawing an Israeli warning that it was preparing a big major response. Meanwhile, hectic diplomatic efforts are going on to prevent Israel from invading Lebanon. The United States, European allies and Arab powers have proposed a 3-week ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon as part of a bid to try and clear the way for negotiations and also avert an all-out war after days of airstrikes by Israeli forces. In a statement released by various nations to implement a pause in fighting, it said, and I quote, "It is time to conclude a diplomatic settlement that enables civilians on both sides of the border to return to their homes in safety." Senior Biden administration officials have said that they expect the governments of Israel and Lebanon to make statements accepting this deal in the coming hours, and have even expressed hope that it will open the door to achieving a so far elusive end to the ongoing fighting between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Though Biden has been widely criticized for mishandling this escalating crisis, and there is still no immediate word from Hezbollah on whether the Iran-backed group would agree to this deal. While the US-led initiative to secure a ceasefire with Hezbollah has the support of France and the other Arab countries, it does rely on Hezbollah agreeing to stop firing on Israel before any ceasefire in Gaza is secured. Hezbollah has long insisted that any cessation of firing on its part is only dependent on an end to Israeli operations in Gaza, where negotiations over a ceasefire for hostages deal has been stuck for months. Israel has been pounding Hezbollah rocket arsenals, and Hezbollah is firing back with hundreds of rockets at Israel a day, ramping up the range and number each day. Israel has drastically stepped up its strikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon this month as it begins to pivot away from its nearly year-long war against Hamas in Gaza. Just only last week, Israel made returning residents to their home its target, and the very next day, hundreds of pagers belonging to Hezbollah militants exploded across Lebanon. And the day after, Hezbollah walkie-talkies also exploded that led to the escalation. The twin attacks killed dozens and injured thousands. Israel didn't really say it was behind the attacks, but it did claim responsibility for an airstrike on southern Beirut just the next day, which killed the leader of Hezbollah's elite Radman force, Ibrahim Akil. Meanwhile, terrified families are now fleeing their homes in the south of Lebanon as the Israeli forces continued their campaign of airstrikes across the country. The United Nations officials estimate that thousands of Lebanese and Syrian families have already made the journey. Those numbers are only expected to grow as Israel targets southern and eastern Lebanon in aerial bombardments that local officials say has killed more than 600 people this week alone, and most of them being women and children. As concerns mount and desperate families continue to flee, there is hope that all the effort by the allies is being done to prevent a major war from breaking out. Well, even if a temporary truce is indeed reached, officials are still skeptical how long-lasting such a deal would be and whether it would amount to a longer-term political settlement that the US officials have urged. For now, tens of thousands of people have been displaced from towns and villages on both sides of the border by nearly daily exchanges of fire between Israeli forces and Hezbollah. Israel has said that it prefers a diplomatic solution that would have Hezbollah move further back from the border. However, Hezbollah, which also says that it wants to avoid an all-out conflict, says that only an end to the war in Gaza will stop the present fighting. Well, Gaza ceasefire efforts are deadlocked after months of failed talks mediated by Qatar, Egypt and United States. So for now, the impasse continues with no breakthrough in sight and several losing their lives and homes in the process.